QB chasing.
G'day, listeners, and welcome back to another very special episode of the Matter Menality Podcast, where we talk all things training, nutrition, and psychology to maximize your performance. Today, we're actually talking about something a little bit different, but still inside the realm of training, and that is group fitness business, the overall fitness industry, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Joined by a good friend and former guest of Bros with Brains. I have no idea how we've let this slip through the cracks that he hasn't even been on my podcast yet. Joined by Big Max from the Performance Hub. How are you, brother?
I'm very well, mate. How are you?
Mate, I am fantastic. It's a Thursday. Work is done. Getting into more of the fun stuff now, which is content, talking to good people, having great chats, helping other people in the industry, hopefully. Mate, how's things? How's family life? How's business?
Mate, my life is complete and utter chaos, but I wouldn't have it any other way at the same time. So it's a very positive form of chaos that I exist within. But it's good. It's really good.
How's Performance Hub going? How's everything down there? Obviously, we're going to get into that real soon in terms of growth and development, but just in terms of sheer Melbourne fitness business growing, how's Performance Hub doing?
Yeah, mate, it's doing really well. Which we will no doubt get into. I post the whole COVID thing. I really chose to not pay attention to what the industry is meant to be doing or what the trends are meant to be. Personally, I don't care. Because if I take the stance that, well, I need to make this work regardless, then what the trend is actually doesn't matter. So for us, we kind of exist in our own little world, doing our own thing. And that seems to be working really well for us.
Isn't that shocking that if you don't buy into all the bullshit that everyone else is doing, get caught up with crap, that your business seems to succeed?
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Like the amount of coaches I speak to and they're like, oh, are you worried about cost of living or like a recession? It's like, mate, we were closed for 2 years, like a recession, please. Like,
which call it a Tuesday.
Yeah, I welcome recession.
At least in a recession, there's still businesses that are open.
Correct. So no, it is all good down here.
That's lovely to hear. That is very good. Obviously, I think we share a very similar approach. This is something I kind of want to get into because I think a lot of the unfortunate side of online coaching, social media, YouTube, Instagram nowadays is kind of polarizing the idea of what we do. And I think it makes it this lavish, sexy lifestyle that we know once you're in the trenches of it. And beyond just the cookie cutter approach to programming, like when you're actually in the trenches working with people one-to-one, semi-group training, small group training, semi-private, when you're actually in the trenches hands-on with your people, not just like, here's one of 12 programs that I own, 7,000 people just bought it, so now for luxury living. When you're actually trying to make a difference in people's lives, there's a lot more that goes into it, I think, that people don't really pay attention to. And part of the reason why I wanted to have the chat with you is because you've made that secondary account now where you're driven to actually put out business education content, which I think is fantastic. We try and share something very similar against what people have advised us to is like, you're not a business coach, don't put out business content. But I'm trying to show people the performance in funnily enough, your company's name, the Performance Hub, but to us, performance in business is also reflective in how I coach, because if I'm not operating by those same standards and those same values and beliefs, then I'm not holding up to the values that I preach. I'm not showing behind the scenes how I do it and, living by the telos and the principles and prophecies that I sort of preach, which I think makes a big difference in how my clients perceive me.
100%. Yeah, I couldn't agree any more with that. I think, I deliberately started a new account, partly for fun, to get some enjoyment back in the process, but also because, I wanted to start some different messaging. And it's not that I wanted to hide it from my clients, but it was things that a lot of people that followed me from way back when I was doing, whether it was nutrition coaching or like S&C stuff, they probably don't care, right?
Yeah.
So I'll just talk about it somewhere else. But at the same time, I think what makes me good as a coach and what made me better when I made this connection is I believe that we are all the same as our clients a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
We make the same mistakes.
Yeah.
We struggle with the same obstacles. Sure, they might be, exhibited a little differently, right? Mm-hmm. I can do the whole fitness thing. I can get myself shredded. I can eat well. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to be able to, submit my tax on time though, right? Like I'm useless in these other areas of my life.
Yeah.
So I need help in these other areas, right? And I've got tons of accountants and stuff that I have as clients. So I think once you get off your high horse a little bit, you become a better coach.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I think being open about the process, the
Yeah.
good and the bad, is important because it makes you far more relatable to people.
Yeah.
And, I believe that connection is a big part of coaching, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think, put it this way, I wouldn't want to work with a client who saw me, being transparent about how I approached business and coaching clients as a negative.
Yes.
Because like, why would I hide anything?
Yeah.
It's like, because I'm not sitting on a beach in Bali, charging $300 a week for a shitty program. Like, that's not what I'm doing. So I have nothing to hide. And I think it goes back to what you said. Like, if you practice what you preach, then you can come from this place of, true integrity.
Yeah.
And I think that's a pretty powerful thing. And it's, in a weird way, it seems to have been, most people, I think, go into fitness out of a desire to do good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of the business gurus, they end up getting people to pivot a long way away from that. And I think that's a mistake.
Yeah, I think even just going back to your point there, like I think there's a degree of when we look at true coaching, right? Like I'm fortunate enough to interact in circles in like the American coaching market at different sports, different levels. Like I pay to be part of those masterminds, those circles for this reason that the sporting culture in America is so ingrained in their society, in their life, in their developmental periods of like adolescence. Like if you're in the NFL, the American football era, if you're in the lacrosse, if you're in the gridiron wrestling, doesn't matter. The art of coaching over there is so much beyond. Well, I saw a great definition that called it the preacher coach, where it's like going back to kind of like the 1800s, 1900s sort of preacher trying to teach life lessons through their church and their temple or whatever it might be, and they would use that as the way to try and lead and guide people. And the preacher coach kind of has the same similar philosophy, where they're trying to teach through adolescence to the younger generations, to upcoming men and women, about what it is to be a better person, to be connected with other people, to be part of a team, to be part of something bigger than yourself. And I think in our game now, there's become this kind of separation of what coaching actually is. It's this perception that we're looking at X's and O's and just, here's your macro target and here's your set rep count. And we're talking about like who's got the greatest lengthened partial program and who's got this, the bar path moves in this direction. The most beneficial resistance curve is this set up at this exact angle. But then we know nothing about our client outside of training. They've got like anxiety, their life is depressed, they're barely touching their partner, they're about to get fired from work. And we're just like, yeah, but you were one rep from failure instead of two or three. And to me, it's like that connection of coaching is missing, which is the pivotal link to actually getting real results. And I haven't found a field of coaching where that doesn't apply. Whether it be Gen Pop, small group, elite athletes, bodybuilders, powerlifters, like that connection has always yielded a result for me, regardless of who my population is that I'm serving.
100%. That great point. And I think we can learn a lot from that model of coaching, which is the model of coaching I've always followed. And it's funny, I was at an event down here over the weekend. It was a great event. Rasheen Hawley put it on, if anybody knows her. But one of the things that kind of came up, right, was this theme from some of the presenters even say, if you're working with elite athletes, then maybe it is all just about numbers. And if you're working with elite athletes, then maybe it is, about the type of equipment and your program really matters. But if you don't work with elite athletes, like you want to make sure you focus on the human first. Mm-hmm. And what I thought was interesting was, or what I noted as interesting is, okay, clearly nobody here has really worked with elite athletes.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. Because I came from that pro sport world.
Yeah.
Right. And anybody who has been in that environment and, you're working with high level physique athletes, right? It's like, what, you think their personalities all of a sudden just don't matter?
Yeah.
So what? They're just a computer and I can just like punch in a line of code and then just go and do the thing. It's like, no, like working, especially in a pro team sport, like those American models you referenced, like you're navigating all these different things. Like this person's gone through a breakup. This person's got, crippling anxiety anytime they've got to show up to practice, all these different things that you've got to deal with. So it's actually even more important to take that model. And I think it's where I don't think it matters what type of coaching you're doing, right? If you're doing one-on-one PT, if you're doing two-on-one, if it's semi-private, if it's a group model, I don't think it matters, right? I think you're trying to establish connection with the people in front of you. That's really important. And something that I try and teach the team here all the time is it's not just about the sets and the reps in the program. The programming doesn't really matter. Like, okay, if it's total trash, maybe, but assuming it's not, it doesn't matter. You want to bring a message. Like I try to bring a message to every session. And I think of it more as being like a performance, or it's more like art than anything else. And I know that sounds super woo-woo, like, ooh, coaching is art, but it's like, if you approach what you do as an art form, right? Then I think you can start thinking outside these constraints that you've been taught in your Cert 3-4 or your exercise science degrees where, periodization. It's like, forget all of that stuff. Right? Because none of that stuff matters beyond a certain point. If we go with this, okay, this is my art form, right? How do I do this to the absolute best of my ability and create, this message? And as I say, like, I think if you're coaching in person, it's almost a performance at times, right? You've got to inspire the person in front of you to do something that they are not going to be able to do or they don't want to do by themselves. And that's not an easy thing to do. And you can't inspire somebody by going, guess what? We're going to do lengthened partials on the hamstring curl today. Like, don't get me wrong, I love training, but even I don't get inspired by that. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, give me a reason to try hard on lengthened partials, right?
And like, there's so much in amongst that conversation. I think that just, again, it just goes back to the art of coaching. I refer to this all the time. The art of coaching is being lost through the idea. Like, and this is where, I see people all the time talk about, like, I'm an evidence-based coach, but they fail to look at human connection and psychology as part of that evidence. It's like failing to understand the biopsychosocial models, failing to understand the Bronfen-Brenner model of ecological theory, failing to understand these theories that go into human interaction at up and downstream levels that result in the coaching result. Like, as I've said in previous podcasts, in order to understand the output, we have to understand the inputs, and all these things count as inputs into the person's life. No one 100%. Exists in isolation as a vacuum in this empty space void of any other input or stimulus, that unless, we give them the program. There is so much stimulus coming into our clients from all different angles, 360 degrees. And we get so caught up on this idea that, like, the client just exists and they're by themselves and nothing else matters. And they're all only fixated on the training and their prep and their bodybuilding or whatever it might be. That art of coaching is failing to or the lack of art of coaching is failing to comprehend their existence, that human existence level that is beyond, like you said, it's not just coding. It's not just plugging in ones and zeros and ones and be like, well, this is now a pro card waiting to happen. Like, if you've actually managed pro level athletes or engaged or conversed with pro level athletes, most of the input, like, yes, that stuff is going to matter. Obviously, I'm a big believer, people say, like, the 1%ers don't matter. When you get to the 1%, those 1%ers matter. But you know what else starts to really matter? Are you teaching your client how to manage pressure, manage stress? What is their relaxation period like? What is their understanding of de-stress look like? Are they more concerned with, like, red light recovery as opposed to 7 to 9 hours of sleep? Well, we need to correct that. All these little things where, to me, it's like getting so caught up in these nuances, and whether we're looking at Menno's posts on Instagram and being like, this one tiny percent of tiny ass sample size showed this significance. Now everyone's worried about what time they should have their protein close to training. It's like, well, we're missing so much of the forest for these tiny trees because all we think of is like, well, I've just graduated exercise science, I've just graduated sports science, I've just graduated nutrition science, and the textbook said this. That's cool until your client gets punched in the face and then life happens and all of a sudden your textbook doesn't work. And that textbook, by the way, is probably about 10 years out of date.
100%. Or not even that. It's like, I remember I was speaking to Jamie Smith and he made this comment and I was like, he's probably right, in the sense he goes, look, we knew enough in like the 1970s about training, right? Like, I'm not saying there's been no development since then, but you know what? Arnold had a lot of stuff figured out, right? He knew how to get big. He knew how to train.
Yeah.
So beyond that, so if we're thinking about okay, like what's really going to move the needle, right?
Mhm.
It's probably not getting a tiny little bit better at, periodization or any of these type of topics, because I'm a firm believer that, as you say, like, yeah, you can write out this 12-month training cycle for somebody, and then they could get injured in week 2. And then,
Yeah.
well, all of a sudden you're pivoting anyway, or they lose their job, or they go through some other life event, and none of it matters. So if you simplify it, which I'm a big believer in doing, and zooming out, it's like your two main variables that I see. It's like you've got effort and you've got time, right?
Mhm.
We need someone to try really hard, and we need them to do that for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
How do you maximize those two things?
Yeah.
Right? And it's through the exact methods that you just outlined, right? That's what it's about. And, people use different analogies, right? Connection, buy-in being another
Mhm.
one. Like, how do you establish buy-in from behalf of a client? And I think the most overlooked part here is you do want the client to know that you give a shit, right? That you actually care.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time, people are probably signing up because they don't have that person.
Yeah.
But they don't have that person that really cares about not just the result that they want, but, why do they even want that result
Yeah.
in the first place? Like, why does somebody want to step on stage?
Yeah.
Right. So they're signing up with you because Ben's going to ask me the questions. He's going to get to know me, and he's going to know like what makes me tick and
Mhm.
why this matters to me. Great. And once they know that you actually care about all that stuff, well, yeah, of course, then the effort increases, and then they're able to sustain that effort for a longer period of time. But if you skip over that stuff, which
Yeah.
a lot of coaches do, well, then it doesn't matter what training program you ride or what meal plan or macro split or whatever, because the person's probably not going to try as hard, and they're not going to stick to it for long enough.
Yes. As soon as like, that this is where, to me, like, the sale is so important. We had a little bit of a joke before the recording started about, cold DMs and trying to just absolutely play the numbers game in coaching. We both know that if you look at motivational interviewing, onboarding processes, sales consultations, if you treat the client like a number and you treat them like, oh, you're one of 99 that I sent out today, sign up for this, because if you don't, it'll go to someone else. The quality that that client comes through as is going to be terrible anyway. They're not even, the likelihood is they're not going to get a result because they have none of that emotional buy-in or connection. They have no perception of success. You haven't increased any likelihood of self-determination because you've basically just told them they're a SOB for not wanting to sign up, or they're a fat glob, and you just made them feel worse before you even attempted to make them feel better, and then had them solidify that I should just really not work with this guy or work with anyone because all trainers are assholes. And it's this absence of the connection at the start where the client doesn't believe that you believe in them. And to me, that's so important in the consult. Like, being able to put yourself in the client's shoes, being able to sit there and, you don't have to say, like, I've never been obese, but I've been injured, I've been depressed, I've been suicidal, I've been sick, I've been overweight from medications and, back injuries, car accidents. I've had these things where I can sit there and go, I understand, but here is a plan in which it makes the most sense to help you get past that. But first of all, it's got to start with you. Where are you right now? What is the reason this hasn't worked in the past? Just having these basic conversations. It's not sales manipulation. I can easily distinguish when I see or talk to people about who has sales. What's the word? Sales strategy scripts, and people who actually understand motivational interviewing and wanting to get buy-in from their client. One requires manipulation and psychological intervention. One requires emotional extraction and actually trying to buy in and achieve a connection with your client. There is a very distinct pattern in those two approaches that would likely impact not only client retention or their likelihood of achieving the result, but whether or not they stick it out. And if they don't get that result, are they willing to keep going? Because the second you have to keep manipulating someone to stay, man, the minute you let off the gas and you're just like, oh, I'm going to stop checking in, or I won't send that message, or I forgot, they're gone. That's it. They're out.
100%. Yeah. I think that's a really good point. And, it's funny because I used to be terrible at sales, right? Because I came from like an exercise physiology, strength and conditioning background. It's like sales. I don't know, just come in and train, I guess. That was essentially the whole thing. And then, then I opened a business and I had to get good. And funnily enough, and now, and I went hard, right? Because I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's where we get into later, like how you make business things work. Like sometimes you just commit to making it work. So yeah, you know what? I was rehearsing stuff and like, because I was so awkward doing it. So I think there's a time and a place to get comfortable with things that you're uncomfortable with, whether that's asking the questions, etc. And now, right, it's funny because now people come to me for sales advice and I'm like, this is a wild 180.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I don't mind saying it, right? But in terms of sales here, like for 2.5, 3 years, I did every single sales consultation. So that's a lot of sales consultations.
That's a lot of sales.
It's a lot of sales. Like it's millions of dollars of sales, right? And I'm not like one of those gurus who's like, here's my Stripe screenshots, blah, 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 blah. But it works. And I think where a lot of coaches go wrong is people get all their information from the same places these days, right?
Yeah.
Which could be a positive, but it also means when there's a mistake being made, everyone's making the same mistake.
Yeah.
So I'm not an Alex Hormozy hater by any stretch of the imagination. I think he comes out with some really good stuff. His sales framework, right? The closer, you got to clarify, label, overview, sell the vacation, explain away concerns, reinforce the decision. I think that's what it is. Like, great. Until you get to that part where it says sell the vacation, right? And he's very big on this idea of, yeah, you want to sell Maui, right? Sell Hawaii, sell the beach. Don't sell the fact that there's going to be traffic on the way to the airport and there's airport security and they're going to have to like be cramped in their seat and blah, 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 blah. And like, I get it, right? I get it. On the flip side, he was selling 6-week challenges, right?
Yeah.
So keep that in mind.
Yes.
Because if you follow that, yeah, you could sell a 28-day challenge or a 6-week challenge and it'll absolutely work. And he's got some good structures. But if you're then complaining that your retention isn't very good, well, you have yourself to blame because if you don't tell somebody what the process actually entails, then you cannot be upset or surprised that they were unhappy when they found out they might actually have to put some work in. Right? And I kind of take the exact opposite tact. I'm very similar to you. It's very much motivational interviewing. And I'm pretty relentless in these consultations. Like, it's funny, like we've got tissues and stuff in there and I'm like, they're not a prop, right? I'll regularly make people cry. Yeah. And like the people that I work with as well, I'm not the first person they've ever come to with this problem. So they've got, a decade, probably more, of failed experiences that they've got to navigate through. And I'm trying to figure out, well, what needs to happen here for this to be different? Because I don't want you to repeat that same thing. And that involves, we've got to dig deep and figure out what went wrong every other time, right? And if I can't do that and I can't get to the bottom of it, I'm probably not going to try and sign the person up, right? But if I can get to the bottom of it and go, this is an absolute no-brainer, then a couple of things happen. And this is, I know you mentioned, Jack, you want to talk about storytelling, but people need to make that connection, right? And I can't tell them. So asking the right questions, that motivational interviewing framework, I need them to have that light bulb moment, this epiphany. And I need them to walk out and go, this is going to be different. Because you know what? Nobody has ever taken this much time to get to know me before trying to sell me a gym membership before. Every other time it was like, how much weight do you want to lose? Cool, let's go, let's crush it. And then I lost motivation 2 weeks later. Whereas this time it's like, wow, this guy went so deep. This is definitely going to be different, right? And I think if someone's listening to that and like, wow, that sounds like a lot of work. It's like, well, yeah, you know what? It is. It is. All of this is a lot of work, but it pays off.
It's a lot. I think, and this is something that like there's so many points in on this conversation in general. That's why I wanted to have it. Firstly, I think it's important to understand that true, genuine, client-centered, client-centric coaching is emotionally taxing because you spend so much of your time emotionally buying into the goals and the beliefs that your clients have, often before they do. You're like, one of the things I had to pull back on was seeing the potential a client had before they realized they want to put the work in to achieve it. And I would get so heart involved, caught up in, driven by like, man, this kid's got it. This kid wants it. You know, I can see myself in this kid. It's the person, like, I'm the coach that I needed to have when I was younger. That's who I want to be for this person. I'm like, I will march through hell for this kid if it means he's going to do X, Y, Z. And then all of a sudden, like, you know, they've met a new girlfriend or like, you know, there's, you know, this club or holiday opens up and all of a sudden their attitude's changed. And, you know, that it can be an emotionally taxing experience when you start to realize like, Oh, it turns out not everyone wants it as much as they say. You've actually got to get the right questions, start to ask the right questions, have the right answers. And then eventually you have to let actions prove before words. And like I think that's a large part of where people get so caught up is like, someone will come through and they'll hear the right words, they'll be like, yep, this guy said he wants to lose 10 kilos. My 6 week challenge is all about 10 kilo fat loss. That's literally what we advertised. Fantastic. But let's look at how connected to this goal is this client? How real is this goal to them? Like one of the things you talked about, failure mapping. I call it failure and success mapping. I use a really simple strategy called laddering. It's not to manipulate, it's to simply extract from them belief and buy-in. Why has this not worked in the past? This is not the first time you've had this conversation or this emotional extraction or this dive into what you're after. It may not be as deep as this, but you've been there. You've tried to get here before. You've probably done carnivore or low carb or new year, new me. Like you've done something to try and achieve it. Why did it fail? And then you'll hear like all that they'll start to unpack the reasons why it's got in the way. Something's happened. Life, family, friends, events, not understanding calorie counting or tracking or restriction or just nutritional literacy, like being overwhelmed by advice or whatever it might be. It's like, okay, so what's going to make this time different? Oh, I want it. Okay, well, you've always wanted it. Why is this different? And you start to get to these connection points between them where they're going to drive. And like, oh, I actually have belief in you because you believe in me. You sound like you believe in me. Like you sound like you want me to get there. And I'm going to show up for you at first because it seems like you want me to show up as opposed to just want me to pay a bill. Like you look at the average gym model, it's simply how many people can I sign up before they actually turn up? Like how many clients can I have where only like 10% actually come through the door and the rest just keep paying your retainer fee for doing nothing?
Yeah.
Oh, you actually seem like you want me to come through the door and do the work. Yeah, I believe in you. I believe this time can be different. A really simple question for people that are listening, for coaches that are listening, I use not as a manipulation, but simply a kind of like a lock-in, like a this is to solidify what you believe. Before this call, 1 to 10, what was the number that you believed you were going to achieve your goal this year? 5. Okay. Why a 5? Well, I didn't know anything, or this happened in the past, and this coach treated me like shit. This was terrible. Okay. What is it now after we've had this conversation? Oh, it's at least an 8. An 8's pretty fucking strong. You're 80% certain that we're going to get this goal no matter what. Yeah. Cool. What do I need to do to make it a 10? Well, now they're giving you the problems that they currently have. Like they see that these are the only limitations. Okay, so if we can solve these limitations right now, then you believe it's a 10 out of 10 that you're going to show up every single day, put in the work. Yeah, fantastic. Here's how we solve those problems. Cool. Now you're bought in, and none of that is manipulation. It's literally having you walk your life through me. Why has it failed in the past? Why is this time going to be different? What makes it that number? How do I make that number higher? I believe I have those resources for you. Here they are. I don't even care if you sign up, but here's the resources. Off you go. Like just having that in-depth conversation beyond, oh yeah, my program will achieve this for you. That'll work, like you said, for the first 6 weeks. That'll work maybe 4 to 6 weeks. Like the average New Year goal lasts until 28 days. And then I think 80% drop out by week 6 and have not even come close. That's not even just fitness. That's lifestyle. That's health, nutrition, finance. Doesn't matter. So let's use that as an example. That might work 28 days to 6 weeks. But after that, when the client doesn't feel appreciated or respected anymore, or just they're just another number, or you've got the money off them and off they go, and you're no longer checking in, having those conversations, you didn't build any rapport, well, they're just gone. And they're gone back to the same cyclical behavior. They don't feel respected. They didn't feel like that coach was the answer. They got lied to. And then coaches like us have to pick up the scraps and trying to make up for what was then being burnt yet again. Would you say like a similar approach between yourself and that I guess like that, I don't want to say mapping, it's really, I don't even call it a framework, it's just a conversation to me, but like that conversation is kind of how I guide things in my consults.
100%. I call the whole thing just mapping the journey. So like it's pretty much exactly the same. And I think within that, like, because so many coaches struggle with this, right? And I come back to this all the time, but if you are unsure of something when it comes to an issue with a client or a prospect, I hate the word prospect, but let's just say prospect, on a call, it's like, you just got to ask the question. Like, that's what it all comes down to. Yeah. Like I call it like, there's like 7 questions that I'll give coaches advice on all the time, but some of the best ones, like, okay, cool. Like, what are the 3 best ways that you think I can help you as a coach?
Yeah.
Like, just ask that. Like, there's no harm in asking it. It's like, how will you know if you're succeeding
Yeah.
week to week? Cool. Like, what does that look like to you? Okay, cool. What would constitute poor coaching from my end?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. How will you evaluate me as a coach? Like, just ask those type of questions, right? If you're ever unsure, it helps to build up your confidence, because then you're like, oh, hang on a minute. Yeah, no, of course I'll do that. Because the other thing is, like, the standard's pretty low, right? So
It
it's
is.
actually, it's not that hard to be head and shoulders above everybody else, unfortunately. So
Caring. Just care.
yeah, right. And I think, like, the main thing is, like, you just you need to have a genuinely good service that you deliver. So, like, let's not overlook that. Like,
Yep.
if you're not a very good coach, then none of this stuff's going to matter, because
Yeah.
you're not going to deliver on it and you're going to lose all your clients. But assuming that you are, then you just want to create this idea in the client's mind that, okay, this time it will be different, right? And then back that up.
Mm-hmm.
It's as simple as that. Like, hey, last time it didn't work. Why not? Okay, we've got a good idea. Perfect. Well, this time we're going to do it differently, and you're going to have all these things that you didn't have last time,
Mhm.
and you're going to have me, because I've got your back.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And a lot of the time, that's all people need to hear, because
Yeah.
you are quite possibly the only person who thinks that they can do it,
Yeah.
or the only person who gets why they need to do it. And that's a pretty powerful thing.
And that's like, and because to really understand it, it's where coaches need to take a step back and think before they became a coach or before they had that passion or love for fitness. How many people in your circle believed you when you started your fitness training, or when you started that first fat loss or weight loss or muscle gain, or I'm going to go to the gym? How many people fully bought into that was what you wanted to do? How many times when you go to Christmas, let's say, even as a coach, like I coach coaches, I've coached people that are prepping themselves. Obviously, I coach people that prep and they're coaches. And how many times have you gone to, a Christmas or a birthday or a lunch, and they're still trying to force feed you, even though you've said what your goals are? So imagine, to the average person you're working with, how much they come up against that with a lack of support. Honestly, most of the game, or most of it, that initial buy-in and belief, is that they feel a part of something that has their back and supported. And
100%.
you give them that. And this is where, again, like the pillars of my business, and by the sounds, it's very similar to yours, the main pillars of self-determination theory, because we're trying to give the client self-determination. We're trying to give them motivation without the Eric Thomas, Tony Robbins like inspiration. I argue this all the time. Inspiration and motivation are very different. Trying to get intrinsic motivation into a client's life so that they can go, I have the power to do this. I'm showing myself that I'm capable of doing it, and I'm supported by people who want me to do it. You give people those three things, and it's game over. They've won. And the funny thing is, so me and Brooklyn, it's great having my partner who has a background in marketing and business. Like that's her thing. My background is business and coaching people and performance. It kind of gels quite well. Is the biggest walking billboard for marketing when people try to come up with these, like, just go DM 100 people and get your cold calls out there, and 1 in 3%, 3% of every 100 sign up. So just throw the numbers out. The biggest walking billboard for you is going to be that client that got a great result, wants to tell everyone.
Yeah.
Not just got a great result and hates you, but got a great result and had a great experience and loved it. They will go through hell on earth for you to tell other people. And how many people do you know in the coaching space, that need coaches, or like clients that you have, where one or at least half of their group friendship is probably overweight or looking to improve their health, and again, went through a similar experience and now just didn't want to act on it. Now your client is going to them, hey, this guy's different. I know we've all tried different shit before, or this women's group, or this empowering group, or this men's health group. We've tried all those things, but this guy gets it, or Performance Hub gets it, and they want to help out. Like, that credibility will quadruple your revenue long before like this XYZ marketing strategy or cold call this will. But again, people just get so caught up in treating everyone like numbers instead of people, that even if I get you a result, and you feel like shit about it, or you hated the entire experience, yeah, you lost the 20 kilos and you got a six pack, but you hate me from it, you're not telling your friends. And therefore, I've actually just burned you and lost your potential network, instead of built with you, like have built that buy-in with you. And now I have access to your network without intentionally trying to manipulate. I just think that it's such a different approach that can yield, on a business sense, drastic differences in revenue and just client retention.
100%. It just, like, it compounds over time as well, right? Like, the more of those that you have
Exactly.
walking around, and it makes everything else you do more effective. Like, this day and age, I don't think anyone's just going to sign up with a coach or a gym or whatever it is without doing a little bit of stalking themselves anyway, right? So yeah, like we spend money on marketing, of course, but it's so much more effective. Like people go, oh, but like, what do you spend? Like, it's not necessarily about how much we spend, although like, yeah, you should be like, to be clear, like the more you spend, I mean, the better your results are probably going to be.
Yeah.
But beyond that point, it's like, well, yeah, if someone sees the ad, okay, some people might just be like, wow, this is the first time I've seen something like this. Absolutely, I'd love to come down, but that's rare. More often than not, people are going to see that ad and they're going to go, oh, click on it, have a sus. I'll search them on Google. I'll read all like the reviews I can find there. I'll thoroughly like fact check this stuff, right? And for us, it's a massive advantage because in this area, like it's not just what the reviews are. Like, yeah, cool, we've got 100 and something 5-star reviews, brilliant. But it's like, what do they say in the reviews as well?
Yeah.
And then people go through, and then I always ask people, oh, how'd you find this? But oh, I read the reviews, and it just said like, this is not like a normal gym. This is not like a normal gym. This is not like a normal gym. So we've built that like credibility and reputation, and that goes a long way, as you say. Like, it's a very powerful thing that, you know, it's not as sexy and it takes a long time to build up and all the rest of it. But once you do put that work in, well, yeah, it's absolutely beneficial.
Yeah, it's just basically built like that. That culture is just basically becomes the engine. Yeah, like an advanced engine takes time to build. It's not just a standard assembly line. Like you got a Mazda 3 coming off the line. I drive a Mazda. It's not a D. I'm driving a Mazda. But like the time it takes to build a Ferrari versus a Mazda, you know, that time investment, yes, it's slower, but what the end product is tenfold better in quality and delivery. And, you know, that to me is like kind of what you're describing there. It's like the slower burn, but along the way, you're building reputation, you're building a social authority, you're building social proof, you're building buy-in. And then by the time the person gets into an environment like yours, they're seeing 20 or 30 other people in that small group, or 10 or whatever the limit numbers are that you guys work with in that environment. They're like, oh, it's 5 or 10 people, but they're all of different sizes or different goals, different beliefs, different whatever, but they're all in here getting after it. And Max is over here kicking ass. The rest of your team is over there like psyching everyone up and having a good time, talking shit, banter's high. This does not feel like the gym that I went to previously or the coach I had previously. I actually feel it looks like I'm going to be a part of something. And that's what people are looking for is like, and, you know, yeah, I'm kind of over the whole like team this coach thing that people get up and, you know, into. And really it's just 20 individual people that have never met in their entire life. But when you actually join a culture of people that are like-minded and getting after it, you're like, these are my people. And especially in a day and age where we are so disconnected, even though we're so connected, you know, everyone's in isolation, work from home more, not as much getting out and doing things. Feeling like you can leave your immediate network and join something greater to a degree is going to have such an impact that your retention will go up purely based on that. People want to stay, they got the result, they want to stay for the environment.
100%. 100%. And I think it's important as well. Like we've touched on things like, you know, your self-determination theory and motivation, but something I think a lot of coaches discount is as much as we can be super transparent in an effort to make ourselves more relatable, there are going to be times when we're not relatable to our clients, right?
Yeah.
And I have this discussion with coaches sometimes, especially the ones that like post stupid discipline trumps motivation and, you know.
Oh, that annoys me. It's the same fucking thing. Discipline is just intrinsic motivation, guys. Shut up.
100%. You know, it's like, do you know why David Goggins runs ultra marathons? Because he's motivated to do it.
Yeah.
Like it's that simple, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, all this talk of like, oh, we've all got the same 24 hours a day and blah, 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 blah. It's like, yeah, guess what? If your job involves coaching people and your job involves being in a gym, it's absolutely easier for you to work out.
Yeah.
To say that it's not is just stupid, right? But because of that, there's going to be this limit to how relatable you are as a coach. So having people around your clients that are like-minded and come from a similar background is massive. Right?
Yes.
Because sometimes I've got a group of like 45-year-old women. You know what? I'm not all that relatable to them. There's part of them that'll be like, Max, shut up. What do you know? Like, you wait, like that kind of thing. Or even you, where you're prepping someone, they're like, yeah, Ben, it's easy for you. This is your job. Like, you can just do this because it's your job. But if they're part of a bigger community, I see you guys do this really well, even though like it's online coaching as well. You create this like culture and a community even though a lot of it is online, right? So they feel a part of it. So there are these people around them. They go, yeah, we're kind of all in this together. There are people like me doing this. And because those people can do it and they work in a corporate job as well, great. If they can do it, work in a corporate job, great. That means that I can do it as well.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of coaches overlook that type of stuff.
Yes.
It is really important.
Yeah, I completely agree. And this is why, one of our 5 tenets, pillars, fundamentals, whatever you want to call it, is community, because it's so important that, I think we built it based on the premise of I knew what it was like to be highly driven and not be surrounded by people who are highly driven.
Oh,
And
it's the worst.
that isn't to have a dig at anyone, it kind of is as well, is that your social circles aren't always going to want to be the most supportive if your goal exceeds theirs. That's okay, because people will only really support you to the distance that they can understand what you're chasing. And then once it goes beyond that, suddenly it's like, hey, let's pull back in a bit. Sometimes you need to endeavor outside of that and be surrounded by other people who are fucking go-getters that want to be the foot up your ass that you need, but also want you to be the foot up their ass. And it's like, it's hard to, 40 years ago, you couldn't have that network outside of probably who you knew in corporate or business or on the job site, because that's all you knew. The thing about social media and the internet and WhatsApp groups, chat groups, forums, discourse is you can be connected to such a larger range of people that you can actually find these go-getters or build this avatar, build this client base that is more like that. And where it used to be like there might be one in every 1,000 in your local town, now you can build an entire business off because, hey, I relate to that person. He was like me. He started off like the one thing that I always turn back to is my stories. Car accident, technically diagnosed disability, chronic impairment of my spine, worked a full-time job, went to full-time uni, went to full-time prepping. I've done the extremes of these things. So when I tell you that it's possible, it's because I've done it. And also I've built a range of people around me that have done similar things. You have someone like you in our culture that you can go, I'm a tradie, I'm a FIFO worker, I'm in the mines, this is happening, and I find it really difficult to still tick my goals. What do? All right, go talk to like 5 of my guys. There is at least 5 in the business doing this. Oh, I have consults now where I work with people who are like veterans or former ADF or current ADF. And I can talk them through like, oh, did you go through this with PT as well? I'm not a soldier. I've never been in the military, but I've had so many interactions. One of my most successful clients is excelling in the advanced pilot program in the Air Force. So I know from baseline to advanced metrics what they're doing, what they're looking for. So I can go, like someone signs up to me and goes, oh, did you do that as well? How'd you find that? It's like, that was pretty shit. Hey, like, training and fatigue is quite high. We need to control for that because the PT school will do this. You develop that understanding of your people, and you're like, I can surround you with more people like you that will have your back, because in society you probably don't have that.
100%. 100%. And I think it goes back to what we said at the start as well, because the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you actually connect with your clients in the first place.
Yeah.
Because if you never made that connection with your first client, you wouldn't know half that stuff about the training process within the Air Force, right? And for me, it's like absolutely the same. Like the more I get to know clients, well, then the more information I have in general. And then if I'm going to be coaching a similar type of client or a similar type of person over time, well, great, right? I've just got more at my disposal, more tools at my disposal, and more stories to tell them, right?
Yeah.
To increase motivation when the time comes. It's like, look, don't worry. Like, hey, you're probably struggling with this. They're like, oh yeah, how'd you know? Well,
there's 40 more of you back there.
100%. And then like, there's comfort in that for people as well, right?
Yeah.
It's like people, like even me, it's like, trying to think of an example. You go to the doctor, they're like, cool, you need to have this surgery. And the doctor goes, oof, I've never done this surgery before. It's like, whoa. You don't, but whereas if he's like, don't worry, I've done 10 of them this week. You'd be like, oh, great.
Yeah.
This is my guy. That's kind of what you want.
That, as much as you even said previously, you don't buy into everything Hormozi talks about. Some of the things he gets right is confidence is doing the thing and building proof that you can complete it or do it. Having a list of clients you've worked with, or having a variety of people, starting to build that trend of culture where that person comes to you and goes, oh, I've got this problem that's been so unique for everyone else and this and this. And it's like, that's cool. That's my bread and butter. Like that's one of 50 people here with a similar experience with you. And guess what? Here's the leaderboard of our results, or who's got the best lifts, or however you build that like even a semi-private model, you're building that kind of like competitive edge. Yeah, sweet. I bet you can take Troy over here, who's got a 140 deadlift. He went through a similar problem with you. I reckon you can probably do 150. I have the proof here the program works, so just jump in and have a crack. So there you go. that proof builds the confidence. And that confidence then conveys to your client that you have belief in them, that you can do it. And together you will achieve it as a team. And again, it's just like you've got to be able to be in there, be amongst it, have that network, have those connections, those conversations, build that trust early on so that they can open up to you. Because, like you said, now that I know that about my client, I can have more conversation, more stories, more experiences to share that other members of my team, we've overcome that together. As a team, we will overcome that because I've done that with Greg and Susan and Fred and Karen. And it's going to be not much different to you. Though you feel alone in your circle, I probably have 20 of those clients right here, and we've all done it.
100%.
Straight away, that client's just like, oh shit, this is different.
Yeah.
Kind of ties in quite nicely because I want to move into something where we're going to get probably a bit more intense because probably without inadvertently by I think sheer necessity, you've probably become a bit more intense, or at least have more intent in what you're doing out of sheer force necessity to survive. In being a dad, a growing family, growing business. So you could argue you've got two families. You've got the business and the family of Performance Hub, and you've got the family that you have in home. One of the things that I've found in order for me to succeed in business and do the things I've done, it's all, people see the glitz and glamour, like we've flown to America twice now to present. It's cool. I love it. It's absolutely an awesome opportunity. I sacrifice so many things to be able to be in that position that people don't see it. They're like, oh, you just love to do this. It's your job. It's great. Guess what else I do in life? This. Well, you get on stage as a bodybuilder and you go to uni. Guess what else I do? Nothing. Bodybuild, study, run a pretty successful business to help change people's lives. That's it. That's my three things. I play games sometimes. I have a spare few hours, in off season. But you've done something similar, even though you don't kind of go on the same sort of narrative as I do, in the sense of like you have to be all in, you have to do this at a certain point. That sacrifice is required. I call it like the funnel of mastery. The greater you want to master and experience a situation, the more narrowed that funnel has to become, and you have to get quite niched and unique. You guys did that to kind of get through that experience. Kind of talk us through that with, I know we've kind of touched on it in Bros of Brains, but to the unique listener here for coaching and business, how extreme did you have to get? How deep did you have to get with like, fuck it, nothing else matters right now but this?
Oh, pretty deep. And something that, like, I love marketing, right? Like the psychology of marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And my guy when it comes to marketing is not, like, don't get me wrong, I don't mind Hormozy at all. He's got some great stuff. But I'm a big Seth Godin fan, right? I love his approach to marketing in general. He's got a brilliant book called The Dip. It's tiny, but when I read that, I was like, whoa, this guy absolutely gets it. Because we're taught this idea, right, that winners never quit and quitters never win.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's totally wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Because winners quit all the time. They just quit the right stuff.
Yes.
Right? Because for me, like, I get this question a lot, like, how do I stay focused? It's like, yeah, I'm absolutely susceptible to as much shiny object syndrome as anybody else. Like, yeah, I'm ADHD like everybody else. I just don't think having ADHD is a crutch or an excuse. I think you just acknowledge it and you go, cool, what do I need to do to overcome these obstacles and move forward? Yeah. Like, stop hiding behind labels. That's a different rant. But all this, right? It's like, yeah, during COVID especially, I was like, I can't go bankrupt here. Right? Yeah. Like, my wife is on maternity leave. I've just had a daughter. Like, I'm in peak lockdown. Everybody else is getting angry at the government. And I'm like, cool. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm angry about this situation. That's not going to serve me in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
I don't have the luxury of getting angry about that. I need to dial in and go, what do I need to do to stop this thing from imploding and like literally ruining my family's life?
Yeah.
That was the point, right? And like, full disclosure, I had a business. I had a wife not working, and I had a newborn daughter, and I got to the point where I had less than 10 grand in the bank, and that scared the shit out of me. I was like, this is not a good situation, right? So from that point forward, it really became like, okay, this needs to be the thing. And the only way I know how to make this the thing is to make anything else not the thing.
Yeah.
So did whatever I needed to do to get out of that situation, right? Moving forward out of that, I did the same thing over and over and over again. And I've done this before when it comes to, like, I was big into martial arts and stuff. back in the day. Same thing. Stop doing other stuff. That's how I had enough time to train, right?
Yeah.
There's no secrets here. We all have a limit on our time. But coming out of COVID, I did some crazy stuff, like going all in on this place. It required me to stop doing online coaching, right?
Mhm.
Which was hard. And like scary as well, because I was like, hey, this is a good source of income for me. I still kind of like doing it, but it's a distraction.
Yeah.
And I'm getting messages from clients and it's not their fault, but then I'm getting anxious about it because I feel like I'm not giving them my best, this whole situation. So I had a pretty decent client roster and I pulled the pin on the whole thing, right? And I just went all in on, no, this one business is the thing. And even within the business, people are like, hey, should we start a new thing? I'd say, no.
Yeah.
The main thing is the main thing. And that right now is the only thing. And people go, oh, how did you grow it so fast? Well, that's how I grew it so fast, right? It was the only thing that I allowed myself to do. And yeah, like, was I out partying on the weekend? No, right? I was like, work, dad, work, dad, work, dad, collapse into a heap and sleep for as long as possible. That's pretty much it, right? Now, I'm not saying that is a long-term strategy, it's sustainable and it's super healthy. It's probably not for a lot of people, but I'm saying that's what was required for me to get to the point that I'm currently at. And that was the trade-off, right? Nowadays, okay, there's a little bit less day-to-day pressure, which is good, but it's still very much an idea of, well, I now have 2 kids. So, hey, that takes even more of my time.
Mm-hmm.
And then outside of that, I still have the business. I do a small amount of work like with other coaches now, but it is a small amount because I don't have the time to do other stuff.
Yeah.
And any time that I would spend doing that simply requires me to take time away from my main business or time away from my family. Mm-hmm. And I'm not willing to do that. So that's really what it boils down to. And at the moment, my own training, it's not a priority. Like, people take the piss out of me when I say that, like, oh yeah, but you're still in shape. I'm like, yeah, I'm still in pretty good shape and I'm still decently strong. Cool. But that's more so that I spent a decade training my ass off and now I'm just maintaining, right? Yeah. I'm not really moving the needle forward. And that's okay. That actually was a weird, trippy moment for me to be like, wow, I didn't think that I'd tied so much of my identity up in actually being that guy, but it turns out I had. Whereas now, it's a little bit of different priority. So I think it's very similar to you. Like, at the end of the day, the hardest part for me anyway has not been working really hard on something. I can do that. Yeah. It's actually saying no to stuff that is hard, right? And if anybody listening to this goes like, how do I overcome like this struggle where I lack focus? Well, put it this way. If you've got 10 things on your to-do list and you kill 7 of them, you will be more focused on those 3 things. Yeah. Right? Less is more. Yes. You've just got to do less better.
And I think too with that, just making sure that what is on your to-do list is moving the needle in the thing that matters most. People get like their to-do list is like 20 different directions of 5 different topics. Like, that's great. They're all cool ideas. In fact, one of the funny things about mine and Brooklyn's relationship in the business sense is half the time it's her telling me no. Like, I'll come up with ideas or strategies. I'm like, hey, I want to run this. I want to think about this. I want to do this. She's like, but can you take away from this? Will that give to this? Will this cost here? And it's like that. My brain requires that person. Our business mentor actually said to me, he's like, you need to have more ideas than she has ability to execute, because it means she'll always have something to do and generate. Because if she doesn't, it means your company isn't growing. But where you have to decide is what you focus on and execute. If you have 20 half-completed projects and none of them are actually moving the dial, the needle, the scale towards success or what you're trying to achieve in the lasting impact you want to make, well, then it's not a part of the immediate project. It can't. It's not something you should focus on. And again, this is where I look at it. Like, I look back and I can't tell you in the last probably 5 years. Like, Matter has existed 5 years. I think Open Trade has been like 3. But I can't tell you the last weekend that I went out and with the intention of like going out. I when I was working at Nutrition Warehouse, doing podcasts with Scaff, starting up content, putting out free information, I was working weekend shifts so that I could take weekdays off so I could go to uni to do I'd scheduled my tutors, my lectures on the same 2 days I would have off as my structured days off. That would be where I would go to campus. And then the other day would be where I would do like assignments and review the lectures and review the notes write more content. Then I'd start my week again. My week was actually like Thursday through to Tuesday, Thursday through to Monday, and I had to have Tuesday, Wednesday, or something like that to go to uni. So it's like, in order to get to that position where it's like, oh, you guys get to fly to America, and like it's amazing, 100% it's cool. I don't call it a privilege. I call it something I work for. It's not
Absolutely.
born with the privilege to fly to America, knowing coaches over there that otherwise would have never met without social media and a growing business. But the time that has been invested to get there, it's like at a certain point, it's scary when you start to look at it from a philosophical sense. We only have so long that we are here. And it's great when you're young, where you think like everyone tells you, like, the world is your oyster. You have this great range to do whatever you want, be whatever you want. At a certain point, that stops being true, because in order for you to succeed and go anywhere in life, you have to narrow down and pick a few things. And that gets scary, because it's like, I have a crazy passion, obsession with comics, with nerd shit. I have a weird interest in history. Like, I could sit there and discuss things that don't make sense to most people. Like, why would you want to know that doesn't impact business or coaching whatsoever? But they're just like side knowledge interests that I have. But if I get caught up too much in that, it takes away from my actual business. I think high school advisor was like, you should probably do social sciences. You should do social sciences and teach history. I did not go anywhere near history, because that wasn't, what actually moved the needle for me. But the point being is that at a certain point, you have to narrow that lens, remove the peripherals, and focus the funnel and get as deep as possible. Because one of the things that really excites me is, at a certain point, what happens when you look at like an hourglass. It narrows in, the sand dips through like a one tiny little crack, and then it opens up. That is what I call the funnel of mastery. At a certain point, you narrow in, you get really specific, and then on the other side of that specificity, where it's scary, and you're like, I'm removing all these other opportunities. I might never do this, and now I'll never get to be a rocket scientist, or I'll never get to be a musician. Cool. But at the other end of that funnel is a new funnel that opens up. It doesn't narrow, it opens. And that's where you get to be more of who you are, more complex and more deep. You get to have bigger conversations. You get to go host events. You get to run as a field authority. That's the cool stuff. That's where it's like, oh, this takes me around the world, or this takes me to these people and makes these impacts, and I get to work with these levels of people that believe in me. And I think that's where people get really scared, is that initial narrowing and going, I'm going to sacrifice everything else, and this is what I'm going to do. And
100%.
It's going to be only 2 or 3 things, but I'm going to do 2 or 3 things really, really, really well, and see what that produces. And I think, especially in the coaching game, being able to do that is pretty much how you get results. You don't get, long ramble short. Basically, we see all the time in social media, the Bali influencer, the Gold Coast influencer, the Thailand influencer, the travel the world influencer is like, oh, I'm an online coach, and this is my system, and this is what I do, and this is how I live my life. And we have this idea that online coaching is going to produce that. And you'll do it. You start the first 6 months, and you should have 40 clients, and they're all paying $200 a week, and you're living the high life and making millions of dollars. The reality is, guys like us will spend most of our time in that business for at least the first 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
But what comes from that, I think, if you really narrow it down, is what you thought was going to happen in 5 years probably happens in 12 months, maybe 2 years. And then you basically extrapolated the time frame, and you're able to move faster because you're so focused. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, if that's what I did in 2 years, what can I do in 5? To me, that's where the game gets exciting and gets bigger. But you got to be willing to narrow in and really focus on that point.
100%. I think it's a really good point. You don't absolutely filter through the noise. And I think it also starts from asking yourself, maybe doing a period of introspection, let's call it that, where what does success actually look like in your business?
Mm-hmm.
What is success? Or how I like to start with is actually, what is failure? What does failure look like? Because I set some pretty lofty goals at times, right?
Yep.
These days, I'm not really hey, this is my 10-year plan guy. Anytime I try and do that, within the first 12 months, I'm like, well, that's shot to shit. Looks like we're moving in a different direction. So maybe a year at most, but set some lofty goals. And then I go what does failure look like? And 9 times out of 10, failure actually isn't not meeting the goal. Failure involves, okay, I haven't tried, or I haven't fulfilled on what I said I was going to do.
Yeah.
That's what failure really looks like. So from there, I'm like, oh, great. So some of the pressure actually kind of goes away. And then I go, okay, what does success actually look like?
Yeah.
Because we're taught what success looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So for many people, the idea of this laptop lifestyle living by the pool, okay, great. For me, that's an absolute nightmare. I
Yeah.
don't want that. I hate, like, my wife would tell you, we go on holiday, mate, within the first day, like, I don't want to sit by the pool. I'm
Yeah.
bored. Let's go
Yep.
do something. Let's go
Yep.
do something. Or even, like, for me, like, I know that if I was strictly doing online coaching, it's not fulfilling enough for me. I
Yep.
don't like the idea of everything being remote. I accept that I'm possibly the exception and other people are different, but I know that's not my definition of success.
Yep.
So I think for anybody listening to that, asking yourself those questions is really important too, because then it becomes, all right, what's failure, what's success, and how can I filter through? Like, what are the, I'm of the opinion, if there's any more than 3 things that are like really high priority, then you've probably done it wrong.
Yeah.
Right? Because if everything's a high priority, then
it's not a high priority.
Then nothing is, right? So,
yeah.
And it should be scary as well. Like, it should be. You should be feeling uncomfortable about it. Like, oh my God, what if I stop talking about nutrition on Instagram? What's going to happen? I'm like, I don't know. Do it for 6 months. Let's see.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because, like, hey, if your definition of success doesn't involve being a nutrition coach, I don't know. Here I am. Maybe it's a crazy idea, but probably don't talk about it anymore.
Yeah.
But people will freak out about that, right? They're like, but I have to. Says who? Like, this is the Wild West that we exist in, right?
Yeah.
So go do whatever you want, but just, I think that idea that you've come to is like, yeah, filter it out and narrow down, because, you know, there's so many analogies. You know, it's like, if you're going to chop down a tree, like, what are you going to do? You're not going to, like, whack around randomly. You're going to hit it in the same spot over and over and over again. That's how you make a bigger impact. It's not with this, you know, sporadic approach that a lot of people seem to take.
I think with that too, the question, you know, I've buried the hatchet with a lot of the things that I know I have to sacrifice and do. My health, my time, family. We're like, we don't want, you know, I have no qualms talking about this, but we're not, let's grow a family people. That's not who me and Brooklyn are. The impact I look at, to me, and that success criteria is what I like to call it, is how do I change the school of thought of what people believe is possible for the human experience? If I can have 1 million people go, until I heard Ben's stuff, I did not believe that I could actually go and do this thing. And that to me is like, if I can leave that behind, fantastic. That is what I will predicate my life and career on. But the thing is, I think where a lot of people get caught up, especially in the coaching world, is like they'll start and they'll see all these cool highlights, the James Smith, the Menno, the Helmsman, the Lane Nortons, and even just the mid-level influencer who's traveling Gold Coast and living on the beach. Let's say there's the few that are actually genuine and they worked their absolute ass off to be there, and it wasn't just somehow like nepotism or like, you know, mum and dad had money to pay for it. Argue not only once you've established that success criteria, you know, they call it emotional contrasting. It's a psychological skill, emotional contrasting, failure and success, loss and win, whatever you want to call it. With that, you've now defined that success criteria, right? You've defined the rubric by which you judge that outcome as successful or not. Then you have to ask yourself, and this is for any business, but PTs I find especially, are you willing to do that? That question becomes so heavy then when, okay, I've identified that I can't go out for, you know, I've pushed the boundaries on grades. You know, I tried to do 3 or 4 subjects full time. I realized that the risk of that cost business, clients, quality of client care, because the time was too high. So I had to trade off. I want this degree. I have to do a part-time, which makes it at least twice as long. But twice as long means I can maintain a higher GPA. It means that I can still maintain quality of client service and delivery and results. The company can still grow. We can still do these things. And I can still prep my own lifestyle, train, bodybuild, etc. So it just means that things like weekends don't exist for me. It means that time off doesn't really exist. It means yada, yada. It's not to beat my chest, or it's just simply to give people like a mapped out comprehension of, I've identified what I want to achieve as successful, but then I've also identified that I am willing to do those things. And if it gets to a point where I'm not willing to do it, I'll assess if that goal is still a goal. But I think a lot of people in coaching aren't willing to look at it and go, I actually don't want to do that. Yeah. Or what does this actually take, and do I want to do it? And then if you say, yes, cool, try it out, figure it out, go for gold and see. It may not be the case in 12 months' time or 2 years' time or 10 years' time. Life may pivot, direction may change. One thing for me is it's been pretty consistently clear that this is a thing that I want to do. So I'm willing to make that bet. This is what I want to do, and I'm willing to do the work to make it happen. As a coach, are you willing to be in the gym from 5 a.m., seeing your clients, 4 a.m.? As a business owner, running a facility, are you willing to trade off sleep? Are you willing to trade off family time? Are you willing to trade off expenses in other areas? Going out, socializing, networking with people that otherwise don't really impact your business. Probably not. You're willing to trade that off so that you can grow your business. And I think that's where a lot of people need to reflect and go, in this coaching world that looks really illustrious and successful and sexy on social media, do I actually want to do it? Do I actually want to do what's required to get there?
100%. It's a really good point. That quote is that, people will be jealous of what you got, but not what it took to get it.
Yeah.
Which, is pretty standard. And I think this idea that you brought up there is an important one, because I think it's in that Seth Godin book, actually, but the idea being that if you figure out that the thing is not the thing, the best thing you can do is quit as soon as possible.
Yes.
Right? So you don't waste any time. The worst thing you can do is, that's what he calls the dip. Like when you're this cul-de-sac where you're just going around in circles, where you're not really willing to do what's required to truly get there.
Yeah.
But you're not willing to quit either.
Yes.
Right. So you're stuck in no man's land. And that doesn't serve anybody. So even within like the fitness industry, right? Like retention of PTs and coaches is terrible, right?
Yeah.
But I would never begrudge anybody or think less of somebody who did a PT course. 3 months later, they go, you know what, this isn't for me. I go, that's the absolute right call.
Yep.
Because now you can get on and try and figure out what your actual calling is sooner rather than later. Brilliant work, right? And I think that's important.
Yeah.
That's important. And I think we see, you mentioned some of those influencer types, and people see, what it is. I think James Smith is actually a great example, because people seem to, I don't think he necessarily gets the props that he deserves for what he has been ridiculously good at. People think that he just like fluked it and just happened to put some videos up and they went viral and blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, like I'll look at it, and I'm not a full-time content creator, but I look at what he does and go, every single one of these videos is scripted perfectly. Everything is shot perfectly. The lighting is elite every single time, right? And he's done it again and again and again and again, right? So the question is not, oh yeah, you want to be a influencer with 1 million followers. I wouldn't even ask yourself that. I'd go, all right, cool. Are you willing to dedicate the next 5 years to perfecting short form social media content?
Yeah.
And to posting a minimum of one post per day and 5 videos per week that are super high quality? Are you willing to commit to doing that? Because if the answer is no, then that's fine. But you don't actually want that thing.
Yeah,
because that is absolutely what it's going to entail, right?
Yeah.
It's not just, oh yeah, I posted a funny video, now everybody loves me. Like, well, there's a little bit more to it than that.
Yeah. I completely agree. It goes even beyond just business. Like as clients wanting to get results, there's things like this is where, I call it my body composition goal spectrum. I designed it and built it very similar to kind of like the self-determination theory motivation spectrum, looking at the way it moves from left to right, from a motivation through intrinsic motivation. Very similar kind of layout in how it kind of looks, but it's basically like the client starts wherever the client starts or fits on the spectrum. But usually it's quite left. Left being like absolutely zero baseline of knowledge, nothing. Like it's stagnant. There's no interest in it. The greater your goal, moving towards I think I cut it off as like sub 10% body fat, and then it moves into bodybuilder level condition 3 to 5%. The greater your goal moves towards the right, the more that you have to sacrifice and give up, learn and understand in order to make that possible. Now, and obviously in the coaching sense, I base how I coach you on where you want to end up, not where you're currently telling me you want to go. Not just where you are currently, but where you're telling me where you want to end up and the gap in between. So how do I level you up from here to here? How do I take you from where you are and teach you so that you can be in this position? Because it won't happen otherwise. But the main premise is along the way, it's kind of like you need to be able to understand this spectrum to how to kind of explain it. It's so simple, but it's so not. Like we're trying to basically take that client from zero knowledge and zero understanding of anything to here is like this extreme. Here's what you have to sacrifice and what it looks like to get there. And now we're basically trying to teach you like not only is this the thing you're saying, right? But here is almost like a visual representation of what that will look like. The more you move the needle along here in terms of like your destination, the more extreme it gets, the more cut off you have to be, the more restricted you are, the more sacrifices being made. It gives you a visual understanding of, oh, do I actually want that or not? And you're seeing what it's like. You're seeing what it's like to get mid-level condition, moderately healthy, drop 20 kilos, whatever, and you're struggling here. Do you think a bodybuilding stage is a good idea? Probably not. But we can actually understand, we can visualize that and go, oh, on this spectrum, you start to see if that's actually something you want or not, and just how disciplined, dedicated, intrinsically motivated you will have to be to get there. And I think it's so
100%.
important to have that because it starts to give you in just, I guess, the body composition world, it gives you a perspective of like, you're over here and you're already struggling. We have to teach you to get to here. That's a lot of ground to cover and you're already in hell. Do you actually want this thing? Because if you don't, I will change how I coach you. But it's going to help me get you there better. And then obviously, once you get here, we can make reassessments and go, do you actually want to go further? But I think for the most part, everyone comes in dick swinging, guns blazing, they're ready to go. I want to be Chris Bumstead because I've got a mustache and I've watched all his YouTube content. That's cool. Can you track macros for a week? No. We've got a lot to
We're in
work.
trouble. Absolutely. Especially, I think once you add in like the idea of diminished returns into that spectrum too, where you go, the sacrifice increases, but the results decrease or the relative improvements decrease, right? And that's the thing with high performance in any area, right? You can get to that mid-level and it absolutely requires effort and dedication and all the rest of it. Absolutely. But, there's a big difference to go, okay, I can get to 10% body fat. Cool. All right. You got to do some things right. Absolutely. To get there. Like I've never been stage level lean, right? Because I know it's not it for me. Like I'm not willing to do that. Right. And I think people need to be aware of that. And I think it's really good if you're giving them that kind of comprehension of the process itself. Because for me, in my current situation, like, all right, what am I willing to do? What am I not willing to do? I'm in shape. Sure. I'm not going to track my macros. Right. I know I'm not going to. And you know what? Sometimes I'm going to miss workouts. It's going to happen, right? That's the reality that I live in. As such, there is absolutely a ceiling of what I can achieve, right? And I'm okay with that. And I think most coaches, they don't want to place that ceiling on their clients because they go, no. Well, I wouldn't want them to get disappointed because then they might cancel or they might not sign up, right? If I tell them they can't go and do that. It's like, mate, if somebody comes in and goes, I want to win a pro card, and you're looking at them and they go, yeah, I just love going out with the boys and getting on it on the weekends. Like there's such a disconnect between these two, between their reality, and their goal that I think you're almost obligated to correct them on some of these things. But I think that visual representation is an important thing because you can say something to someone and they go, oh, yeah. No, I get it. I'll have to, cool. I'll have to quit drinking. Yeah, sure. But then when you actually lay it out in front of them, it's like, this is what it's going to take and this is how long it's going to take. And by the way, you're going to get to 10% body fat and you're going to think you're almost there. And I'm going to think, cool, now we're just getting started. Like we are it's very different worlds that we move into.
Yeah, and exactly that. It's giving these people, like giving someone not a journey map, but it's just giving them the layout of like the difficulty that lay ahead and where you currently are. And like, hey, you know what? If we get towards this and it's not for you, I think that, like we said, we've had this conversation about business, not about coaching. But I think there's such, a lot of the content I try and create is taking the lessons from bodybuilding and showing people how it relates to other areas of life, and not so much bodybuilding, but just simply the lifestyle of physique development and what it requires and entails. There are so many lessons in amongst that, like any sport. There's so many lessons and stories amongst that traverse to other areas. I have found the benefits of bodybuilding have impacted my studies and my business. And so, teaching these lessons, these experiences, understandings, it helps me give clients comprehension in other areas of their life. delayed gratification, having specific goals, sacrificing what you want now for what you want later, and being able to take yourself beyond what you thought is perceived failure, knowing that you can suffer and go through hell and come out the other side, probably better for it. All these things start to lay out for me like these are lessons that you can learn from a sport that everyone calls vain. Like, yeah, if you're just doing it because you want to get photos for Instagram and do a naked photo shoot, cool, yeah, vanity. But when you get to the crux of something like this at quite a high level, you can start to see how it crosses to business, how it crosses to life. And this, to me, it's the same with any endeavor. Like there are lessons in amongst that hyper shoot that you'll be able to teach. You now have experiences you can give your clients. Like I've been a dad that's run a business. When I tell you it's possible to still train or still be somewhat nutritionally accountable, just learn how to build a plate, not track it, make portion sizes, whatever. Just add more fruit to the plate, whatever, like little simple lowest hanging fruit strategies. It holds greater value to them because you've done it from experience. You've had the conversation from their shoes, or at least the shoes they want to be in. Someone who wants to be a dad who looks at you and goes, I don't want a dad bod, even though the world is currently saying like dad bods are cool. And you're like, yeah, I don't have a dad bod. Here it is. Like I'm not shredded, 3% body fat, but I'm in relatively good nick for a dad that runs a business. Here's how I do it. Here's how our system can help you. It's like, oh, sweet. I'm in. I'm in. And I think that's such an important tool that people need to understand. Is like there is so much from that experience and wisdom in the things that we have done that might not be directly related to the field, but it crosses over. You can empathize, understand, comprehend, and share. And then all of a sudden, your clients are going to be better off for it. I'm not sure about you, but I have this philosophy that once you discover why you are here, it is now your moral and ethical responsibility to act on it and put it forward. To me, coaching and this is why I think sales are so important when done ethically correct. If I genuinely believe the system that I have solves your problem, it is my ethical responsibility to sell you for the right reasons because otherwise you're not going to get that service.
Yeah. 100%. I totally agree. When I train people on sales, I'm like, cool. If your mum, right, came to me and you knew that she needed help, right? She's unhealthy, she's overweight, she's depressed, her quality of life sucks. Like, how hard would you want me to sell her? Right? Because I'm like, I'll answer that. I'm like, as hard as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to use any trick in the book to get her to do the thing that she needs to do, right? And I think that's like, I made that up on the spot one day and I was like, yeah, cool. And I just absolutely had a group of coaches and they were like, shit, yeah. There's a whole bunch of guys, right? And I'm like, yeah, all boys love their mum. So I'm like, this is a clear, easy one to tug on the heartstrings. But it's the exact same thing that you're saying there. Because it's like, yeah, like, what's the alternative for this person? Like, when it comes to sales, like, I think sales and coaching are the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's all, to me, I'm like, it's just problem solving. So if you think you have a solution to someone's problem, like, what kind of asshole are you that you're not going to give them the solution? Like, quite honestly. And yeah, part of it is this isn't going to happen overnight. No, I can't just tell you what to do because anytime you've done a Google search on this stuff and got the information, you haven't acted on it. So you need to have somebody support you through this to hold you accountable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You need to do this program, right? So I totally agree with you. I think once you come at it from that lens, then the whole process becomes much easier. And I turn people away, right? So, and I try and teach this when I say teach sales. It's like, if you don't think you can help somebody, you're also morally obligated to tell them that, right? And say, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time out. It's been great getting to know you. At this point, I actually don't think I'm the best person for you. And then you refer them to something that you think would actually work for them, right? Because, I mean, that's just being a good person, right? At the end of the day. But I feel like a lot of coaches, they feel pressure to like, well, the person's here, so I need to try and sign them up for something. It's like, no, don't. Like if somebody walked in and said, listen, I want to prep for like the next IFBB season, I'd be like, sweet. I could name 20 people off the top of my head that are far better at than I am, right? I'm not going to be the person because the first time you come and tell me that you're hungry, I'm going to say, oh, well, yeah, I mean, no shit. Like, surely you knew that coming in. Like, you're going to get nothing out of me and I haven't gone and done it. So I would point them somewhere else. So I think that's something for coaches to remember as well. Like, if you want to approach sales ethically, when the person should do your program, push the program, right?
Yep.
You are obligated to do it. But equally, when the person shouldn't do your program, push them away.
Yeah.
Like, don't be an asshole. Don't say, no, sorry. Go
Redirect.
away. Redirect them to someone else. Hey, and they will absolutely respect you for doing that. And then they'll quite possibly refer somebody else to you in the future.
Yes.
Or when the time
Just
is
about to say
right.
that.
Yeah. When the time is right for them to do it, they'll come back.
Mhm.
Because they'll always remember you like, no, Ben was great. Like, he took the time out of his day. He chatted to me through everything. And then he just said, look, I probably shouldn't do it. And you know what? He was right. I shouldn't have.
Mhm.
Right? People will remember that.
It builds, yeah, like to me, that level of respect as a coach, it also builds authority in your networking system. It
Yeah.
tells that person, like, oh, this guy has a system in place and there are people around him that are equally as good. His circle of excellence must be great. He must know great people. He's sent me to someone not only reputable and I got a result with, but he was willing to not take my money. So by association, who he associates with, I'm assuming good people, and just on what he's delivered, he's a good person. Now, the next time, like that person undoubtedly has a friend or a family member that, oh, you wanted to lose some weight or this happened, or remember how you wanted to get stronger or increase your platform lifts, or you want to get shredded for a comp. Who was that coach? But it turns out you weren't ready for, or like who do you recommend? They're going to go, oh, I wasn't ready to get on stage. You are. There's this guy to go talk to. He sent me away because I wasn't in the right position, or told me up front it's going to take years of work to get to, and I wasn't ready to do that. But you look like someone who's ready to go. Go talk to Ben. Go talk to Max. That's going to be the guy to help you out. Like you're building almost a by proxy marketing system just by being a good human.
Yeah. Right. Like, it's not complicated. Yet for some reason it doesn't get done, which is mind blowing in some ways.
I think this conversation, if I was to try and wrap it up really, I would argue both of us together in this conversation, we do not fit the mold of trended business guru strategy and suggestions. The most of the stuff that we talk about is usually advised against how people guru business. Get as many numbers as possible, sell whoever walks through the door. You have to sell everyone, mass produce products at the least possible cost to increase revenue and return. All of the things that are just about numbers. Yet, arguably, being client-centric, compassionate, yet driven, purposeful, still hold a degree of intensity, we are still producing, I would argue, pretty successful businesses in what we do in the realm that we do it. And it goes against almost all of the grain of the way these gurus and advisors suggest most business strategy. But to me, it's like, understand if you're a newborn coach, if you're coming out, fresh from the system, is don't get caught up in how many new courses can I learn about, biomechanics and movement systems and energy systems. Like the basics will do for a while. Get good at them for sure, but nail the fundamentals first and then build off that. And you can definitely stack on and add this on here because we'll go for 4 hours if you don't. But getting really good at those basics and then getting really good at being a coach, get really good at being client-centric as a coach will take you so much further than knowing everything about the Krebs cycle and not knowing how to talk to your person.
100%. Like, at the end of the day, your clients can YouTube that shit if they really were interested in it, right? Like, and, look, biochemistry knowledge is cool. Like, yeah, I did a master's degree in physiology. I don't use any of that shit.
Yeah.
like I could do what I do today with literally zero qualifications.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't regret going to uni, by the way. But I'm just saying it's not the be all and end all. And yeah, I agree. Like, I give some counterintuitive business advice most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'd put myself in the anti-guru category.
Yeah.
Right. Even to the point where I'm like, you know what? Maybe you don't need to scale your business. Maybe that's actually not a good idea.
Yeah.
Because I say this to people all the time. I'm like, you know what scale looks like? F45 is scale.
Yep.
Right? If you go, oh no, but I want to really make sure that I go high quality training and I really individualize everything. Cool. That's not scalable.
Yep.
End of discussion. Just get really good at it. And then, charge accordingly. Right? So I guess you could scale that way, but whatever. But yeah, I totally agree. I think becoming a better coach, funnily enough, is the key to being successful in the coaching industry.
Yeah.
A wild suggestion. And, the world's going crazy that that's somehow like counterintuitive or controversial advice. There's absolutely nothing wrong with stacking skills, and you should become good at sales and marketing, right? Absolutely. Like, again, I think you're obligated to be good at that if you are a good coach, because otherwise, how are you going to spread that message? How are you going to have the impact that you want to have? It's impossible, right? So yes, absolutely. But first and foremost, it starts with make sure you're good at what you do.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's the foundation, right? Because as much as we've talked about the positives of having, positive like client results and how that word can spread and stuff, there's also a negative side, right? And the reality is the negative is going to spread far faster. Like we've all heard the horror stories of like the prep coach who stuffed up someone's prep and like was negligent. The person ended up like hospitalized or malnourished and blah, blah. Like that gets spread so much faster, right? So there's not much point becoming like the world's best marketer if you're going to deliver a shitty service.
Yes.
Because all that's going to happen is the word will spread about your shitty service a lot faster.
Exactly. And that credibility is so easy. It's an interesting world where credibility is so hard to build and so easy to taint. Once you lose it, it's so hard to build back, but building it up takes a lot of time. When you get there, you have to nurture it. And I think this is the thing too, where people think like, in regards to the success of the coaching industry, once you get to that pinnacle that you've defined, you can almost take your foot off. And that's where I think people get complacent, they get content, and their services go backwards, their systems go down, they don't modernize with the current system of the world, with what people are expecting. And you end up falling down as a proxy to the fact that you've been so complacent. Look at, you've got there, that's great. You've got to maintain that standard. That is now, if you work to have that reputation, you've worked to have that marketability and be that guy or girl, that is now what you have to hold. That still requires work. Maintenance, to a degree, still requires effort. And if your maintenance isn't being invested with effort, to me, maintenance is going backwards. If you're not putting in the work to continue at least hold the level you're at, maintenance where it's like, when people tell me, I just want to cruise my business or my studies at maintenance for a little while, or I want to, do XYZ at maintenance for a little bit, like that's cool. Understand that if you want a 6-month maintenance gap in your physique development, whilst everyone else is working towards achieving a specific look, I'm sorry, but that you've gone backwards from what the current game is, just by not putting in the action. So to me, if you get to that point as a coach, as a business, as an entrepreneur, whatever it is, and you're like, I'm here now. If you don't sustain that with effort and integrity and discipline, it goes away. And then you, by proxy, become that guy who was like, yeah, he's up there, it's cool, but you fall from grace, basically. It's like, again, that marketing, now you got a really good marketing system of you being shit.
Yep.
Mate, we're going to be here, forever if we were to talk business, strategy, coaching. For a very simplified finish off, a couple of questions that I would love you to spit out, because you've been there, you've done it in the face-to-face and online world. For that new coach that's starting, for that new coach who's trying to learn and understand, what are 3 metrics that you would probably suggest they focus on or understand in growing their business?
Ooh, in growing their business. That's a good one. 3 metrics. I think I would look at average client length. Like how long do the clients stay with you, right? I'm not going to say what it should be, because I think it depends what your actual offer and what your service is. But look at that, right? Because if you can't retain clients, like that's probably the first thing that I would focus on, right? To make it business related, I would tag onto that probably your average client value. Like how long do they stay? How much revenue do you get from that, right? There's that. But if I'm going to give a answer that's more in tune with what we've been discussing today, because I could give you metrics forever, but like I don't think they're the be all and end all, right? I would say, how much time do you spend each week reflecting on the week that you've just had, right? So the same thing that you would ask a client to do, like, what have you done well this week? What have you done not so well? What made it a good week? What made it a bad week? What could you have done better?
Mhm.
Right? What do you need to do more of? What do you need to do less of?
Yeah.
Like literally spending 30 minutes doing that each week, I think for a young coach is
Mhm.
going to move the needle forward so much more than the world's fanciest spreadsheet when it comes to tracking data. So like that's what I would actually suggest you do. And it's the thing that it took me far too long to realize that I needed to do.
That's what I think is great about conversations like this is so much of like, I went to business school. I deliberately went to study diplomas, advanced diplomas in business, and it didn't teach me any of the stuff that I've learned now. And I think that's why these conversations are so important is like actually having a grasp of experience in the industry. I'm a big believer that coaches' jobs are to shortchange the distance from A to B for whoever that person is. It's a big part of what we are trying to do, really. We're trying to navigate that for you in a faster, more efficient way with the experience and knowledge that we have. And I think largely things like business are so in the trenches learned that we get to have this conversation where it's like a lot of the answers are going to be, I spent far too long figuring this out to realize how simple it was. I don't want you to take as long as what I had to. And I think that's a large part of what our conversation, the conversations like this get to be, is like, whoever's listening to this, you're going to basically hear, this is what we did. Don't be fucking dumb like us.
100%, which is where like getting a mentor sometimes is one of the best. Make sure it's the right mentor, right? So feel free to message myself or message Ben, because we'll be able to tell you a whole bunch of people you should not. But again, it shortens that time span, as you say.
Yeah.
Like, cool. If learning from mistakes is cool, don't get me wrong, but you know what's better than learning from your own mistakes? It's learning from other people's mistakes.
Yeah.
Then you just save yourself that pain. So yeah, learn from our mistakes or find a mentor, a good mentor in the space that you want to work in, and you'll be able to learn from their mistakes as well. And
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer, right, that we're all standing on the shoulders of giants. And
100%.
I say this to young coaches all the time, like, you should be better than me. Like, you
Yes.
should get to a point where you
Yeah.
can achieve more than what I've achieved. So don't think like, oh, like if you want to open a gym, right? Don't look at me and go like, oh, wow, I'll never be able to do that. It's like, nah, yours should be better.
Yeah.
Like you should be aiming to do that. That's how I will know that like I've kind of won is like,
Yeah.
cool. If the people that have come through here, whether it's internships or staff or what have you,
Yeah.
they go on to do bigger and better things. Like, great.
Mhm.
That's what I want to happen.
I
Move it all forward.
I said to my mentor, one of my closest people in my team right now, my circle in my life, and he has coached 5 Olympic cycles. He coached NFL athletes. He's coached all these things. I said, I'm going to beat you one day. And like, not as an arrogance thing, not as a XYZ or whatever. He's a CEO of multiple companies now. Like he uses again the lessons from sport and coaching in the business world and the leadership world. So across everything that I want to be across, I said, I'm going to beat you one day. And he was like, I'd be pissed off if you didn't. Like that to me is how I know he's my mentor. Because he's
100%.
not sitting there being like, I'm going to hide these secrets from you. Like, I'm not going to give you everything. I send him shit. He's like, that's dumb. The person who tells me to narrow down and focus things, that's him. Stop being distracted. Don't worry about this. Here's a deadline for that. I want this finished. All these little things. And it's like, that's how I knew that he was my mentor because I said to him and he said, I'd be pissed off if you weren't. That to me is like, that is the deliberate point of a mentor that we should want you to go further than us.
Absolutely. And I think, if that's not the case from somebody that you're speaking with, well, then that's your first red flag straight away. Right? Like they should want your business to succeed almost more than you do in a lot of senses, right?
It's the same way with coaching, is it not? Like we're looking at it as like I should want your goal almost more than you do. Because that's how you know that I'm going to buy in and give you everything I have to achieve that goal. And then it becomes a matter of up to you. But if your coach is just like, oh, that'd be cool to have, versus like, let's fucking go. How do we get there? I'm going to be with you every second of the way. You know that you get to the Olympia stage. Guess who's on backstage with you? Guess who's on the flight with you? Guess who's in your hotel room at 5 in. That to me is like, you're like, yeah, I'm this guy. That's what I want coaching me.
100%.
Last question. You kind of give us one already. Give me a second one instead. What is a go-to book for business, for coaching that you would recommend that is not the dip and something that we can actually give to listeners that will be a straightaway take home, go bang it out?
Ooh. Actually, a good one. It's also really short. So I'm a fan of that. There's a book, I think it's called The Go Giver. And it is 5 lessons in business delivered through this story, which I think works twofold. Number one, the 5 lessons are bangers, really good business lessons. But number 2, it is also a live walkthrough on how you can use a story to deliver points. So
Yes.
it doubles in that. So pretty sure it's called the Go Giver.
Lovely.
Small, thin, but 5 really good practical lessons for business.
Fantastic. Mate, we will leave all the descriptors below and everything for the Performance Hub. Is there any other ways people can contact you or stuff to look out for? Otherwise, we'll drop everything below for the Performance Hub and your accounts.
No, that is great, guys. Like, if you got any questions as it pertains to fitness, coaching, business, hit me up. I'm more than happy to chat. And yeah, Instagram is probably the best way.
Lovely. All right, guys. Thank you for jumping on, mate. I appreciate your time as always. Like I said, this conversation could have gone for 4 straight hours and we probably would have even scratched the surface. Looking forward to and hopefully can do some extensions of this in the future. But I appreciate you jumping on and giving me the afternoon, good sir.
No problem, my friend. Thank you very much for having me on.
All right, guys, that will do us, and we'll speak to you again soon.